Hey folks, Cameron Harsey again with the Fourth Down Foundation, bringing to you from a distance our role model series. My guest today is Gunnery Sergeant Cody Morris. Gunnery Sergeant Morris has spent over 10 years with the United States Marine Corps. He's led teams in Afghanistan, and he's here today to talk with you about his experiences and some of the tools and tactics that he's learned in effectively applying leadership. I'm extremely excited to be able to announce this guest. He's a friend of mine, and he's been very instrumental in the development of our program. He's helped us to be able to bring our abilities to be able to effectively lead teams towards winning cultures. I hope that you enjoy. Please stay tuned. So, Gunny Morris, if you could just tell me about yourself, where you're from, and what were you like in high school?
So I'm originally from Ohio, like most Marines. I'd say about half the Marine Corps comes out of Ohio or Texas. As far as what I was in high school, I wasn't a bad student. I definitely didn't enjoy the academic environment, I guess you could say. I did really good on my tests, didn't really care for homework, so it kind of averaged out with B's. But I learned early on that I really liked hands-on type stuff, so I got into carpentry and welding and thought those were going to be my future. I got into a welding vocational, was making really good money doing welding. I'd do my academics from the morning until noon, and then I would go work my job at a place called Morgan Engineering, and was like an up-and-coming welder fitter for them. And then the housing market blew out, and a lot of financial situations spiraled out from that, and part of that was the steel industry leaving Ohio, and I had to figure out real quick kind of what next was. Which led to the Marine Corps. But I also played sports. I did some wrestling, played soccer. Just pretty normal kid, and enjoyed playing Halo with my friends on the weekend and all that. Had a real good family, home cooked meals, all that good stuff. So that pretty much sums up kind of what happened before all this.
Okay, great. And who was somebody that you really looked up to when you're growing up, and why was that?
That would be my dad for sure. And that kind of can seem like a cliche answer, but so let me expound upon it. So just to give you kind of like an idea of the character of my father, growing up, we lived on a farm. That was kind of confusing till later in life. I never really understood like that weird stint when I was a kid that we lived on a farm. And what it was there was a family friend that offered for us to live there rent free, but my dad had to take care of the entirety of the farm and the horses that were on it. So that was almost a full-time job, but he would do that when he got off late at night, worked at like a butchering facility, like meat smoking facility. So he'd work all day, he'd come back, and I would remember seeing him go out to the farm, out in the barn, and be grabbing hay bales and stuff like that. And on the weekends, he would work extra shifts at a gas station, just to kind of provide the kind of life that he wanted for his family. And growing up, I saw the man just work any job. Nothing was ever beneath him, and he never complained. He always had this like incredible work ethic, and would be the one to have the same handful of clothes that he wore all the time, or the same couple pairs of shoes while we were getting new school clothes every year, and was just really teaching me, that leadership can be costly, and that humility goes a long way, and work ethic is a choice. You don't need to be born gifted in any area for that. And that's really been a standard that I've aspired to since becoming a man myself, a father, a husband, was to bring that type of work ethic and positive attitude to anything that I'm doing. And so hands down, and I didn't know it at the time. Like if you'd asked me as a kid, I wouldn't have probably been able to say all these things. But upon, retrospect, looking back, hindsight being 2020, my father gave me an incredible example in that, and was just a very, affectionate, compassionate father. Being in the Marines, I met a lot of young men that fathers never told them they love them. And I'm like, my dad still hugs me and kisses me on the cheek like I'm 5 years old, and so he's just been an outstanding example for me, and set the bar really high for me to aspire to.
What was his impression when you told him that you wanted to join the Marines?
So he was an easier sell than my mom. They were already upset that I wanted to weld. They went to college for me. They saw that I was, good at kind of like debating and stuff. They wanted me to go to college and be an attorney like you. And part of me, flirted with the idea, but when I came, they definitely were concerned. Iraq and Afghanistan was in full swing, but I was able to articulate, why I wanted to serve, why the Marine Corps, and my father ultimately, we had a real serious conversation, and I told him, my reasons for it, and he respected those reasons, and I was confident that the Lord would provide. I can't add or subtract a day from my life, and that my life was in the hands of God, and that He was going to be concerned, but He was going to support me, and because He knew I was going to do it when I turned 18 anyway, and I was going to remember that He didn't support me. So, yeah, he gave me his support, and he's been never wavered in that. Even in the hard times when I was calling back, and he could have, I told you so. Never did that to me. So he's been an outstanding source of support, but he definitely had his doubts up front.
And I think that's probably understandable. I think it's probably not uncommon that a lot of parents have their resentments at first for obvious reasons, but certainly great on you for continuing to do that. But I'm sure having support from your parents made it that much more easy to be able to do that. So why did you join the Marines?
So part of it, what kind of pushed me towards the military in general was, like I said, I had to figure out a new plan. I grew up, watching Saving Private Ryan, playing the original Medal of Honors on PlayStation, and obviously I knew it wasn't a game, and I knew it wasn't a movie, but I always aspired to kind of the ideals you saw playing out in front of you, the loyalty, the sacrifice, those intangibles. I always wanted those things. I always wanted a friendship like that. I always wanted a purpose like that. Growing up, I kind of felt disjointed. You'd watch these things, and I'd look at everyday life and was like, what? Surely there's, an ability to actually live these things out. They're not just, movies and books and games. And but it kind of just went away for a while. And then when overnight, guys my dad's age came looking for my job and had been welding as long as I was alive, I realized that I had to figure something else out. And so at that point, it was like, okay, let's go talk to the different branches. Took the ASVAB, scored in the mid 80s, which pretty much qualified me for most things, and no matter what branch I went to. And really, what it came down to is I bought the recruiter. Because I went into the other branches and they talked a lot about promotions. They talked a lot about bonuses. If I went to some of the more highly technical fields, because my ASVAB scores, but nobody was talking about Iraq or Afghanistan. Nobody's really talking about difficult stuff. And when I went to go talk to the Marine recruiter, he stopped me. I went in there. He's like, "How can I help you?" I was like, "Yeah, well, I talked to them and they offered me this and they offered me that." And he was like, "Look, man, there are two wars going on. You're going to fight them, and it just depends on what your role is going to be in that. And you got a choice to make. If you want to talk about having the mental and physical fortitude and ability to have the confidence in yourself and those around you, we got something to talk about. If that's not your main reason for being here, you can just go back down the hallway." And that really, punked me out and made me examine, why am I about to go into any branch that is ultimately a Department of Defense, an extension of defending the United States. And he embodied what he was talking about. He looked the part. He was disciplined. He was fit. He was organized, and I didn't feel like I was on the car lot, buying a vehicle. And so really, I was like, I trust this guy to be my mentor, and that started the journey. And then I met a lot of like-minded young men and women in what's called a delayed entry program, where you're enlisted but you're waiting to ship. So you work out together and you study your knowledge, and that just locked me in, because I made such good friends there and was seeing my strength grow. I was learning my knowledge, and this eagerness just continued to build, to go, and that leads us to to where we are now, really. It's just been a continuation of that. So the Marine Corps was just, they shot me straight and they didn't buy me, and they promised me that confidence. And upon looking back, I absolutely had that. You know, when I went into the fight twice, did the invasion of Marjah in 2010, went back to the same place in Afghanistan in 2011, both significant combat operations. I never doubted the men around me and their physical and mental toughness and their ability on the battlefield. And so that was absolutely well worth the cost of admission of the longest, hardest boot camp and all that. So.
Well, that's a great segue into my next question, which is, tell me about boot camp. And I know that may seem kind of broad, so if you could really just kind of touch on, what was the hardest part, and then maybe also what you most enjoyed, or what was the most impactful to you, maybe in a positive light. Not that it's all not positive, but what really stood out to you, both extremes.
Okay, so I would say the hardest part is always, in my experience, especially after being a recruiter for 2 years, I write all of my pulleys that go to be recruits. I write them letters. I get letters back. It's always going to be that first phase, because that's really the first time a lot of them have been away from home. So you're homesick, you're out of your element, you feel like you suck at everything, and it's designed that way, because you're taking everyone from, the young man who's been raising his 3 other younger siblings since the age of 15, in a single parent home, to a kid who's never done a chore in his life. And you're putting them together into a platoon, and you're trying to get them to see that they're no longer individuals, that they're going to win or lose as a team. So there's a lot of humbling that goes on in the beginning, and there's a lot of imposed discipline going on in the beginning, because they want to get you to arrive to a place of self-discipline by the end of recruit training, because that's what actually enables you to be a Marine, the ability to do what you ought to do without someone being over top of you. But in order to get there, they got to make you touch the stove a couple times and get burnt. So that's that first phase. You just feel like every day is a loss. But that's when things start to change, and you start getting, as you get to that second phase, you're getting more responsibility. They're starting to see which ones will break away and be at the right place at the right time with the right equipment. And they start leaving those ones alone and start really just focusing in on the ones that are struggling to get with the program. And, what that culminates in, and what the best moment for me is the end of boot camp, when you've completed the crucible, 54 hours have gone by, you've poured out all your strength, all of your mental ability, every skill you learned, every friendship you made, it just got called into question. And you saw really what happened over these last 3 months. How strong mentally and physically did I really get? How much did my communication improve? How much did I invest in the relationships around me? And you get back, you're on that parade deck, the sun's coming up, and now the bane of your existence, your recruiter, looks you in the eye and says, "Congratulations, Marine," shakes your hand and gives you the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. And now you've earned this title of Marine. They're playing the Marine Corps hymn, like some beautiful orchestrated version. You got the Iwo Jima Memorial, right beyond them. And it's just this overwhelming experience that you go through. And it vindicates kind of like everything that you've been through, all the homesickness, all the days where you're like, I don't know how I'm going to do that. I don't know how I'm going to do that. And it just really just puts it all into focus, that what all the adversity was for. And so that definitely was my highest moment, was getting that Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. The second best moment was actually walking that parade deck a week later. Your family's there and they're watching you. You went there, immature, thought you were a grown man, and now you're walking a little bit taller, a little bit straighter, and a lot more disciplined. And you see the way that people perceive you different, and you want to keep that. You don't want to forfeit that newfound respect, that newfound tip of the hat that the older gentleman that used to look at you as that loose cannon now, but every day is a fight to keep that. So that's kind of and there's just a bunch of fun stuff in between. Marksmanship, super fun, shooting rifles for 2 weeks, rappel tower, swim qualifications, land navigation, all that's great. But really for me, it was getting over the spicy sadness of the first couple of weeks, and seeing it culminate in the end, in between the end of Crucible and Marine Week, where were amazing. So that's really it.
Well, I appreciate you walking us through that. And obviously it all kind of culminates when you first have your tour of duty. And my next question is, you served in Afghanistan. Can you talk about your primary role as a leader and what seemed to be the most effective way to lead your men?
So my first deployment to Afghanistan was the invasion in 2010. Where I went was Marjah, Afghanistan. So it wasn't the invasion of Afghanistan, it was the invasion of Marjah. And just to provide context to that, Marjah was in Helmand Province, which was largely the most dangerous province in Afghanistan at the time. And Marjah was one giant poppy field. And poppy gets turned into heroin gets turned into cash, and that cash financed operations to do terrible things to people all over the world. And the people that were living in Marjah were, incredibly oppressed by the Taliban regime that was, very much functioning there. So our job was to go in and secure that city, to drive the Taliban out, to halt the drug production, give them alternatives. So the first time I went was from January of 2010 to August of 2010. Saw substantial combat throughout that. I was served under a weapons company, but I was attached to Lima company for the duration of it. And it was substantial. It was what known as a clear. Okay, so there's kind of different phases of combat. There's clearing, there's holding the ground that you cleared, and then there's eventually building. When I went back in 2011, I was a leader. So I came back from that deployment. I had a lot of experience under my belt. I was eager to move up into responsibility, different billets of responsibility. And a lot of my leadership was either getting out of the Marine Corps, moving on to new things. So a bunch of new leadership roles opened up. So during that time, in between August of 2010 when I got back and June of 2011 when I went back, I was largely being formally trained. I went to my advanced school, anti-tank missileman leaders course, where they very much focus on getting you physically to be the part of the leader, while also teaching you higher advanced levels within your technical field of, me being in the infantry, specifically anti-tank, demolitions, rockets, missiles, stuff like that. And then I got to go back to my unit, and I got put in charge of a javelin team. And our javelin teams worked in tandem with the sniper teams to help identify, guys that were replacing IEDs, to make sure that the main supply routes remained safe for convoys to be able to move freely. And really just anything that the commander needed us to collect intel on the enemy. We had a really powerful thermal optic for that type of stuff. So when I went back in June, that was my role, was to essentially go out and be used as a recon asset for whatever commander I was supporting at the time, but also just be a normal rifleman, grab my rifle, go out, patrol, do security operations, so on and so forth. A lot of the humanitarian stuff, digging wells, getting pharmacies up and running, installing, solar powered stuff. Not us, but the contractors that would come, we provide security for them so they could get the schools up and running and really just create infrastructure, right? So that was kind of my role as a leader. So I had a team of 4, and I would go on to much more than that after. Now, what principle I would give you, we could talk for hours. But the number one that I would feel through all my experiences, especially combat, is it comes down to leading by example. If you expect something of those that you're in charge of, you better be embodying it yourself, or you're just going to be a hypocrite. If I demand fitness, but I'm unfit, forget about it. If I demand professionalism, but I'm not professional, forget about it. And that seems like a really simple concept that people are like, oh, wow, real insightful. But it's really difficult to execute, because it takes humility. It takes you reflecting on really what your shortcomings are and owning those things and actually seeking to address them, because you're not going to be able to snap your fingers and be everything. So being honest with your Marines and being humble about the things that you struggle with, and while not just sitting on your hands, doing something about it, while also leveraging your strengths is incredibly important. And when my Marines saw that I was genuine, that I did care about current events, that I did care about fitness, that I did care about, both the mental and the physical aspects of what it is that we do. and that I was invested in their development, they naturally gave me kind of, some grace as well, to realize I'm a human being that doesn't have it all figured out. I got a wife and kids that I'm trying to take care of at the same time as take care of them and whatnot. But at the end of the day, as long as you're consistent and you are leading by example, that you're never going to demand anything of your people that you are not willing to do yourself, that's 80% of the fight. But if you're going to go tell them to go sleep out in a rainy field, or you go find somewhere dry to hang out for the night, good luck. Like your rank gives you authority, but your character is what gets you respect. So at the end of the day, they'll listen to you because of what's on your shoulder, but they won't respect you. But if you're out there in that field with them for the right reasons, because you love them, and if I'm not out there in that field, I can't even understand what they feel like in the morning. I might feel chipper, but for me to properly employ my people, I need to know what they're feeling like. And what's the best way to do that? Be out there next to them, carry the same weight, walk the same distance, be in the same weather. And when they see that, they can't help but love you. So, and you can't help but love them. And that's the essence of leadership at the end of the day. It's not faking the funk. It's not following a prescribed list. It's really just taking care of your people because you care about them. And everything else naturally falls into place. And then I learned that in spades in Afghanistan for sure.
How would you, if somebody was not living up to the values that you set, and these are values that, as you talked about, and thank you again, again, there's a lot to go to school off of what you just said in terms of just, being a leader and leading by example, but you also have to embody it as well. You kind of set these values, and it may either be explicitly said or based on your actions. Hey, these are values that I find important. And I think every leader needs to have those values. Now, let me ask you this: if there was somebody on your team that was not living up to one of those values, and it was your job to hold them accountable, let's just say your upper management, your coach comes to you and says, hey, Gunny Morris, and again, your rank at the time, you need to hold them accountable. What they're doing is not right. And they depend on you to be able to do that confrontation. What is that confrontation? How does it sound like? Walk me through what that conversation, what that communication is.
So there's going to be a lot of variables at work here. It doesn't need to be immediately severe. It really depends on what behavior is being called into question. But so right off the bat, the Marine Corps has something that's really valuable already put in place, where as soon as you show up to your unit, you're going to get what's called a counseling. And that counseling is establishing your baseline. So it's going to tell you, for instance, like what your bill of responsibility is and what the actual responsibilities that fall within that. So, what are the expectations? We expect you to have a first class physical fitness test. We expect you to do one online course a month. We expect you to whatever it is, everything and anything about your specific occupational specialty, so on and so forth. All those responsibilities are outlined for you. And you and your leaders are going to have a dialogue. And you're also going to be able to tell them, like, what are your expectations of me? And, so you have this honest discussion, and then ink goes on paper that both parties are acknowledging that this is what the standard is going to be. And then moving forward, it eliminates any wide in or no's, because at the end of the day, if someone that doesn't show up at the right place at the right time with the right equipment, I can point to that counseling and show them, like, you agreed to these things. Okay, so you're in violation of that. Sometimes a verbal counseling is all it takes. Other times you might need to do a formal written counseling to show them that they violated that. And that's going to justify down the road why they haven't been promoted, why they didn't get to move up and do a bill of responsibility, because a lot of young men especially are going to have inflated senses of self, and they're going to conveniently forget about all this unprofessionalism that they demonstrated up to this point. Do you not recall the day that you fell out of that run? Do you not recall the day that you failed to bring the proper equipment? Do you not recall the day that you let your attitude get away from you and had a lack of bearing? And all these things are creating a picture so that when I'm rating them against other Marines, I actually have something meaningful to compare them against. This Marine's never done anything great, but he's never done anything bad, so he's in the middle. This Marine has 5 negative counselings. This Marine has multiple positive counselings. So now we start seeing them across the spectrum separate themselves. And the ones on the top part of that spectrum are the ones that are getting sent to advanced schools. They're getting put in positions of leadership, And it's demonstrated why, because they're more physically fit, they're more mentally capable, they're more mature. And so it really just depends on the individual. And even then, this is where, once again, leadership, the essence of leadership is that relationship, is you just understanding who it is you're talking to. I might have a Marine, say me, I just got done telling you how much I respect my father. If you knew that about me and I just showed up late, or I just blew something out my backside because I didn't really want to try too hard, and all you have to do is come up to me and be like, if your father was here and he saw that, he would be ashamed of you. And then walk away and let me just fester in that. But if I think my father is the worst person on earth and you say that to me, I'm like, who cares? So you have to understand the individual. Maybe that person's not their dad. Maybe it's their wife or their son. Maybe it's none of those things. Maybe they're very material driven and they really want that promotion because it's an extra $400 a month. And that's all it is to them. Like, okay, well, at the end of the day, you're never going to get promoted because you've failed to do these things. So it's combining a knowledge of the individual that you're leading and what really motivates them, and understanding how that factors into whatever behavior is happening. And then you just, whether it be, hey, you get over here, we're going to have an informal conversation, to, okay, you don't want to respond to informal conversations, we're going to have a formal conversation on paper. And then from there, allow the system to take place. Because from there, when you decide you want to get retained and you want to re-enlist, when you decide that you want to get promoted, when you decide that you want to go into a leadership position and I leave and you think that you're going to be able to escape your past, you're not, because your training jacket's going to be able to show that you have not, it wasn't one bad morning or a bad week. You've systematically over time failed to do what you need to do. So in a nutshell, you need, as a leader, to identify what the expectations are early on and clearly and concisely articulate those things and have proof that they were articulated. And then from there, as time goes on, if it was an honest mistake, be a good human being. Sometimes mistakes happen. If this is not normal for that individual, don't nail them to the wall right off the bat. Like you can have a human being conversation with them. If there's an excuse or whatever, that's worthy, then work with them. But if they just straight up were like, no, I just slept in my alarm, like, okay. And then you need to do something that makes it sticky, that is going to prevent them from wanting to do that again. Maybe that's extra laps. Maybe that's getting your time back when everyone else is off. Me and you are staying together for the next 2 hours to do what you should have done this morning that you missed. But at the end of the day, once again, you're there doing it with them. Okay, I'm not going to walk away and be like, you owe me 2 miles. No, get out there and do it. We're going to spend this time together. I'm not going to allow you don't know what you don't know. So I'm going to fix you. And you'd be blown away how responsive people are to that, down the road. And I don't want to go on too long with that idea, but really that's what it comes down to. So know your people, know what's important to them so that you know how to bring that into the conversation and figure out what actually happened. And then from there, figure out what you need to do to hold them accountable, because you don't want them to keep breaking the standard, because that becomes the new standard. But you also don't want to roll with an iron fist and every problem looks like a nail and gets the hammer. So it takes a nuanced approach, and that's why good leadership is hard, because we just want there to be like pick option A or B, and that doesn't always necessarily work.
I think one of the problems that we've seen from coaches is they'll say, well, so-and-so, our leaders are not holding our guys accountable, or, I think they just need to do a better job about accountability. But one of the things that you pointed out, made clear, is that, well, let's first talk about what the expectations were. Were those expectations clearly delivered at the very beginning? And coming from my experiences in the legal community, where it's basically, look, we can make arguments all day, but sometimes it just kind of helps to show proof. Hi, hey, you said you were going to do this. I told you my expectations are to do A, B, and C. Here we are. You got B and C done, but you never got A. So that was something that you told me you were going to do, and here it is. Yep. Here's the proof. And I think that when we talk to our teams about that, I think that kind of blew their minds a little bit. That was there's this accountability factor, but it's all just going to be verbal unless you can just be able to first show what those expectations are, tell them what they are, and make sure that they clearly understand those, because then you have something to fall back to. You're not just being, you're not just telling somebody isn't just thinking you're having a bad day, basically.
Nope.
So,
and there's actually two quick things I'd want to add to that, because contextually, this is down at a team level now. I'm enlisted, right? I don't have the authority at the end of the day to make up. I don't have any authority that has not been given to me from the person who's in authority, which is the officer. That's what the coach is in this situation. I'm not out there going rogue, mutiny against my commander. I'm operating within the framework that he's established for me. He's my authority at the end of the day. If they're disobeying me, they're disobeying the commander. And that is what can actually get you in hot water with disobeying a direct order, right? That doesn't apply necessarily to enlisted the way it does to an officer. So long story short, the coaches need to embolden their leaders. One, they got to put the good leaders in place, because you don't want them to abuse this power. But the coach needs to put his authority behind those leaders. If you expect an outcome, you need to not only define the expectation, but also the consequences, and then support your leaders as they carry out your intent, because you're one man as the coach. You can't be everywhere and see everything, but your leaders, they're in the schools with these young men, they hang out with them, and they are much closer to them and have much more in common with them than any coach is ever going to be able to. It's just how it is. So at the end of the day, when you have these large teams, it's the same way. Like, we have rules of three. So I invest heavily as a platoon sergeant in my 3 squad leaders. My squad leaders invest heavily in their 3 team leaders. The team leaders invest heavily in their 3 Marines. And what you see is that chain of command. You have accountability all the way up and down it. But at the end of the day, what you end up figuring out is exactly who it is that ultimately you're going to answer to if you fail. And what those people on the team need to understand is that you're not disobeying with your buddy. You're disobeying with coach. Like, you disobeying what coach said. And if you, as the coach, enable them and let them know that, then that's going to help those small unit leaders carry out their role, especially because they don't want to be hard on their buddies. So they're definitely not going to want to be hard on them if they know that there's really going to be no consequence. And all they've done is made an enemy with the kid that they go to school with or play soccer with or whatever, and nothing ultimately happened with them with coach. So now they get it from both sides. So they need to know that the coach knows that they understand his intent and that they're carrying it out in a disciplined way, and they need to know that coach is going to support them. And now coach has got up in front of them and provided, and here's the last part, the with them. What's in it for me? WIIFM. What's in it for me? The coach needs to provide the what's in it for me, because if you want that young man to spend all summer doing something like the running challenge, he needs to understand how that's going to translate success in the season. So that's kind of like the carrot. There could be awards. Hey, best team gets this, best team gets that. You're going to have confidence knowing that you're conditioned before the season even starts. Maybe there's going to be some young men on that team that automatically buy in just off that carrot. But then there's also going to be some like, I don't care about being conditioned. I don't care about your T-shirt or whatever. That's what the consequences for. However, for those of you who don't care about all that, the consequences for not doing this is you don't get to play. And your team leaders are going to be checking your stuff weekly. And if you fail to do what they're telling you to do, you're failing to say what I said, and you'll be held accountable for that. I don't care how talented you are, you just won't play because you're not a team player. And now, not only do they know what's in it for them, the good, the bad, the ugly, but they also understand the consequences, and they've entered into an agreement. You want to be on the soccer team, you want to be on the football team, you're going to do this thing. And now when all of a sudden their team leader texts them at 8 o'clock at night, it's like, hey, you logged no miles today, you better go beat feet. They're not going to tell him to go screw himself, because we just tell coach that. And once coach makes an example of a couple people, that's really going to translate and create a culture within the team of accountability.
Thank you, Gunny Morris. I really do appreciate that. I think that, when we talk about what's in it for me all the time, especially when we're talking about high school students, and it's not just, and when coaches say, what are some of the things that we can reward them with? Well, it could be a T-shirt, it could be a number of things, but ultimately I think the reward is, we're moving towards a winning culture,
Mm-hmm.
And what's in it for me? Well, the consequences could be, well, you may not make the team, or maybe you're on the team, but maybe your team doesn't do that well. You're going to get the best looks, the best recruiting when your team is not even succeeding. You're not even carrying your team to victory.
Mm-hmm.
That could reflect poorly on you. It's all about your decisions. Going back to your combat experience, what was one valuable lesson you learned in leadership? And I know you kind of you very eloquently alluded to the leading by example. But is there something else, or is there another lesson that comes to mind that first comes to mind when thinking
Yes.
back on those years?
Absolutely. So leading by example was the one that I went over, but close second, or even tied for first, it's hard to say, they're so intertwined, is decentralized leadership. Okay. For exactly what we're talking about right now. For combats for different reasons, but essentially to provide context on the battlefield, if you're clustered together, it's dangerous. Okay. Whether it be for any number of weapon systems. If there's no dispersion amongst you, if a bomb goes off, a machine gun attacks, whatever, the more tightly you are together, the more casualties are going to be inflicted from that one thing. So as weapons developed, by virtue, dispersion had to increase, or you're going to lose a lot of people. As that happened, communication started to degrade. I can't see you, I can't hear you, but you need to understand something that I know that you don't. So how do we do this? And militaries all over the world have been grappling with this, this new era of combat, which largely defines modern warfare. And, people can argue with you all kinds of different ideas, like what defines modern warfare is weapons that are fired beyond line of sight and this, that, and the other. But what I'm getting at here is a leadership perspective. And what it comes down to is decentralized leadership. And the idea is this: the commander has an idea, okay? The commander has an intent, okay? An overarching goal, okay? So think of that as the coach saying, by the end of the season, this thing's going to happen, okay? And in order to achieve your commander's intent, there's going to be a series of missions that have to be done, which you can look at as the games. For me, the commander's intent when I was on the ground in Afghanistan was to increase stability within the area of operation and the legitimacy of the Afghan government. So every mission I went out and did had to support that. The daily mission might have been go do a security patrol. The daily mission might have been, go do biometrics and do a census and whatever. But at the end of the day, all these little puzzle pieces were being cobbled together to create the big picture, which was my commander's intent. What that allowed me to do out there on the ground was have flexibility, because as situations change on the ground, the task might change, the method might change, but the commander's intent remains the same. So you might need to flex to, achieve whatever that end state is. And if what you're doing in the short term compromises the long-term goal, then that wasn't a smart decision. And that's really what it comes down to, because the centralized leaders, like I said, I can't be everywhere that they are. I can't hear everything they hear. I can't see everything they see. I need them to have a deep understanding of their own limitations and capabilities, their Marines' limitations and capabilities, their equipment's limitations and capabilities, the enemy's limitations and capabilities, the terrain that they're fighting on, civilian stuff that's going on in the area. And they very rapidly need to take all that information and condense it into a decision and act violently with violence of action. And they need to be able to communicate that, because if it just stays up here and their Marines don't understand their part in it, then it's useless. So they need to look at all the variables, all the facts, all the assumptions, come up with a very quick plan, communicate that clearly and concisely, and act. And if you don't do that, if you have leaders that sit and wait to be told what to do, when to do it, how to do it, you have no fluidity, no mobility, no momentum, no anything. You're going to have a very sluggish, stiff force that waits to be told everything. What you want is adaptive leaders on the ground who realize the problem is evolving. And I know what we talked about, but this is the reality now. And if you want me to get this final product for you, this is what I'm going to have to do to get it done. And so decentralized leadership is not only trusting those leaders to make those decisions, and that comes from training and watching them make those decisions, and creating opportunities for them to get it wrong and not murdering them for it in a training environment, creating a safe place for them to get it wrong, but bringing them alongside and explaining to them what went right, what went wrong, and then ultimately emboldening them to make those types of decisions, which goes back to, once again, the commander giving them that authority. making them part of the planning process, making them own some part of what's going on. And if you can do that consistently, your Marine, it doesn't matter if it's the lowest man on the totem pole, if he has a voice and it's heard and it affects the outcome of the plan, now everyone's got buy-in, because otherwise your plan's going to fail because your plan's stupid, and I hope it does, because I never even got to be part of it and I don't agree with it. But if at the end of the day everyone comes to the table as time and space allows, and they get to have some aspect of influence over what's going on, at the end of the day you're ultimately the leader, and then you got to make a call, and you might go against what popular opinion is, but the Marines know their voice is heard. And because of that, they're going to go out and they're going to act independently to achieve that goal. Otherwise, you're going to have just a large conglomerate of people that don't put any extra thought or effort into anything, because ultimately it doesn't matter to them. So decentralized leadership is how we win fights, both here and in business and everywhere else. You need your leaders on the ground, thinking critically and knowing themselves and their unit and their competition, and making smart, fast decisions in light of that.
This seems to me to be an effective fundamental framework for when you're encountering situations like, well, COVID-19, or anytime we're dealing with, some of the stressors that are on athletic teams today, distance learning and COVID-19 and getting testing and all these different things, the mandates, and you name it. It brings to mind our conversations previously about the fog of war, and how important it is to have armed leaders with the commander's intent down there making independent decisions that fall in line with what the commander's intent is. So talking specifically about the fog of war, and for those listeners who may not be familiar with the concept, if you can give us kind of a brief description of what fog of war, how it's defined, what it means to you, and perhaps even just what a typical, give us an example about how when you've encountered that, how you overcome that.
So fog of war, essentially it's part of our warfighting philosophy. I don't want to call it a doctrine, because it's not really like a procedural type thing. But when you read our warfighting philosophy, they bring up the fog of war, and the fog of war is just a way of really speaking about all the unknown variables that is combat, all the things that you can never really know. Okay, things are always going to change. The weather might change. They might have told you that there was a platoon of enemy on the objective, and in reality, there's a company. They might have told you that there was a road there that you could have got your trucks through. In reality, there's not. They might have told you that was a dry riverbed. Its banks are overflowing. And now, what do? You had what you thought was going to happen. You had things that you thought were facts that weren't facts. You made assumptions that you thought were true that aren't. And because of that, that's the fog of war. It's at the end of the day, we can sit there in our little planning rooms and look at our little maps and move our little things around. But at the end of the day, it comes time to execute, get on the ground and make it happen. And things will change. Sometimes it is from poor planning. Other times there's no way you could have accounted for it. And because of that, there needs to be built-in flexibility to your plans. Highly detailed plans are not good plans. We kind of have an idea in the Marine Corps that you want a solid 80% solution that you'll be able to tailor to any specific situation. That's why when we kind of do things like immediate action drills, they're drills that build muscle memory for things that are likely to happen, but you're still going to need to tailor them to your specific situation, right? It's just so that you're not starting from square one in the event that friction, actually happens. So, what's an example of that? So this will actually tie into the later part of our conversation, but there was a point when I was in Afghanistan in 2010 on that first deployment where we were doing a clearing operation. It was the very beginning. We had just pushed in, and they kind of carved up the entire city into specific AOs, areas of operation, for the companies to clear, and it was very much a linear clear, right? So we would move all day from sun up to sundown, and at the end of the day, we would hold firm, pay someone to stay in their compound, and we would go firm for the night, set security, wake up before first light, make sure that everybody, everything was accounted for, everyone was topped off on water, ammunition, this, that, and the other, and we would clear to our next baseline until all of Marjah was cleared. And then from there, we would transition into a new phase. And it was only a couple days into actually seeing combat. And not only for me, but even my leaders who had seen combat, a lot of them had seen it in Iraq. And urban Iraq was not the same as rural Afghanistan where I was at. So we were having trouble figuring out, like, we knew the idea, but once again, it was difficult in execution of figuring out how do we clear with this long line of troops that are losing visibility of one another, that are separated maybe by a compound or a tree line, where if you start to get, too far ahead of one another and all of a sudden something jumps off, your geometries of fire start getting really dangerous, where, you are taking fire from, your 1 o'clock, but if your forward friendly troops have pushed up, you run the risk of hitting your own troops, especially as rounds start hitting the deck and ricocheting. So friendly fire starts becoming a threat, right? And that's what happened one day, so we're sitting there and we start taking contact from a tree line that's in front of us. We've lost sight of the right half of this clearing, this platoon that we have online conducting clearing operations. We got holed up. We had a large compound that we had to clear out. They didn't have one where they were at, so they just continued to move the way across the field. And I'm sure in their mind, they were just going to push up to that next terrain feature and wait for us to finish our clear. But what happened was we took contact from their direction. And for us to return fire would have definitely, you start blurring those geometries. And what one of my best leaders I ever had was Staff Sergeant Whitman at the time, now Sergeant Major Whitman. He was the platoon sergeant of the platoon that I was attached to at the time. At great risk to himself, took out an LZ marker, which is used to, it's fluorescent orange. It's a large rectangle that you nail to the deck so that a plane or a helicopter flying by can see where you're at, where you've marked your LZ, and they can land. So it's meant to be seen from a plane, so you better believe that the enemy can see it real good too. And he took it up and he just held it up until all the leaders, all the small unit leaders were able to see where the forward line of troops was. So he didn't wait. He didn't sit there in his little radio hiding, telling everybody what to do. He saw a problem that was rapidly getting worse. He had Marines that were taking fire, that were unable to return fire and gain momentum and fire superiority. So he himself ran along the line until he found the forward line. And then he took out that marker and he got it up and he said, leaders, get your heads up and look for me. And he's sitting there. And even the enemy must have been confused because it's like there's like a wall in the firefight. And then all of a sudden it all converges on his position. And but everybody knew where the forward line was. So we were able to change our geometries and whatnot. And we were able to very rapidly get the situation under control. And eventually the enemy realized that. They're like, wow, they're synchronized. We don't want all this attention anymore. And they left. And, had a couple more minutes gone by of more disorder, of them not taking fire, they could have been emboldened. 2, 3, 4 more fighters could have showed up. Now all of a sudden you take a casualty. Now we got even more problems on our end. That's how quickly problems can change. And that is the essence of leadership. He saw the problem unfolding. He moved to the point of friction. He came up with an effective, fast solution, and he was willing to take risk to address it. And because of that, we were able to get out of that problem, right? So fog of war, no matter how much planning, no matter how much rehearsals and drills we did, we got lopsided. And then contact happened. And vegetation was there that wasn't supposed to be, and compounds were there that weren't supposed to be. That's fog of war. But that doesn't mitigate the leader's responsibility to overcome those in the moment, in the execution, and find creative solutions to overcome those problems.
What an act of bravery to be able to do that.
Yeah.
It's
you got a Bronze Star at the end of the deployment. Yeah. And I got more stories about this man before we're done. He deserved more than that. But yes, incredible man, incredible amount of bravery.
Well, I don't know if you bring up the same person, but and maybe you would, but is there a particular, my next question is there a particular leader that you admired in your combat experience, and why was that? What about their leadership abilities that was so appealing?
Same man, Staff Sergeant Whitman, now Sergeant Major Whitman. But No, so Staff Sergeant Women was the embodiment. So on our promotion warrants, it tells us that we are going to treat our subordinates with firmness, fairness, and dignity. This man was all those things. Even though we're in the middle of Afghanistan and everybody wants to be a cowboy and walk around with like their sleeves rolled up and their sunglasses on their head, like he would knock them straight off your head, would make you unroll your sleeves, like no slack. Like standards are standards. Don't care how tired you are, don't care, and he had the foresight to realize that if little things stay in check, big things will stay in check. But slowly, systematically over time, as we stop paying attention to small, little, seemingly insignificant things, those turn into big things. And so he was firm, but he was fair, and he loved us. You knew it, you saw it. That courage was not motivated because he wanted an award or any other reason besides the fact that he loved his men and that they were in danger. And to demonstrate the amount of love this man had for us, it was the end of the deployment. We had taken a good amount of casualties at that point. I believe it was July. And he was out on a patrol. And that's another thing. Normally, when squads went out, the squad leader took them. There was no obligation for the platoon sergeant to go. Really, in reality, the platoon sergeant was back at the patrol base, kind of monitoring all the different things that were going on. You had a squad that would be on post for security. We had a squad that was stationed at a school about 300 meters down the road that was providing security while the contractors came in and built it. And there'd always be a squad out patrolling, kind of preventing the enemy from getting close and protecting any assets we had in the area and whatnot, just being the eyes and ears for us. But he would go out on patrol, especially this close to the end of the deployment. We had 5 KIA in our company alone. We had a lot of wounded, so it was very dangerous for him to decide to expose himself to a danger he didn't have to. But he knew that his presence was important, and he never stepped on his squad leader's toes. Even though he was out there and he was senior to the squad leader, he gave the squad leaders their due responsibility. This is your squad. You run it the way you need to. I will be there to move to a point of friction as it becomes necessary. Once again, that in itself is incredible. And he's out there one day, and sure enough, we take contact. And he is down on the ground, on his stomach, trying to figure out where the fire is coming from, when a round goes through the side of his forearm and comes out the back, hits his first aid kit, blows that thing to pieces. And when he pulled up his arm, it looked like there was a zombie bite that got taken out. It didn't hit any bone, but there was a good chunk missing of his arm. You would think medevac, I'm done, Purple Heart, go home. He refused medevac, went back to that patrol base and ran that patrol base. He would have our doc clean it every day for like 2 weeks. This man was missing a good chunk of his arm, but was there because he refused to leave us because of what a precarious situation we were in at that point. And eventually, he realized that it had gotten to a point where he could no longer stay. He didn't want to get infected or lose his arm or whatnot. So eventually he did leave, but he made sure that he was setting conditions and mentoring his squad leaders up to that point so that he could in good conscience leave. So at the end of the day, this man embodied, he was a consummate professional, he was physically fit, he was incredible at his job as a Marine, knew all the knowledge, could do all the things, and just genuinely took care of his people while not simultaneously allowing us to take advantage of that and just do what we want. So it's hard to just capture it all. But at the end of the day, loving your men, holding them accountable, and embodying those standards that you want them to be, that's all he did. And he made such a tremendous impact on me that I don't even think I'd be here today if it wasn't for a leader like that. Because for every leader like that, there's probably 2 that are mediocre and 2 that shouldn't be leaders. But I was blessed to have him as one. And because of that, I wanted to impact young men the way that he impacted me. And that's what I've been aspiring to do. And so at the end of the day, that's it. And he's still in. He's a sergeant major. I don't know where he's at right now. But man, did he change everything for me, in that place. So that definitely would be the man and the story that I would share with you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. It's hard not to get inspired after hearing something like that. Just unbelievable. I love One of the things I love about what you said was how he was setting conditions. That is a great way to put that. As a leader's role is to set conditions. Set the climate, set the environment, how you want to do it, how you want to see it. Based on your values, what you believe in. How you want to run the team. So,
Yep.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Winding down here. My next question is, what are the top 3 things in your mind that every leader must possess? And really pertaining mostly to you. What do you feel are the top 3 most important things?
Oh man, so the Marine Corps has an acronym, JJ did tie buckle, which is 14 leadership traits. And if any of my Marines or Poolies ever see this, they're gonna beat me up because I get asked that often. Which ones are most important? And I'm always like, they're all important, which seems like a cop out, but when you really look at them, so it's justice, judgment, dependability, initiative, decisiveness, tact, enthusiasm, bearing, unselfishness, courage, knowledge, loyalty, and endurance, right? So yeah, all these leadership traits. If you really think about it, as you start taking some of those off the list, you're only 12 of those, you're only 10 of those. You're really, when you look at what was lost, you're like, yeah, I wouldn't want a leader that's not that. So all 14 are important. But what I would say my top 3 would be is one, kind of encapsulates a lot of them, be a professional. Being a professional doesn't mean that you got to be the smartest, fastest, strongest, but it means that you take your job seriously. And they can tell in the way that you speak. They can tell in the time that you invest into it. They can tell what you bring to the table. When they ask questions, do you have answers? Do you understand? Anybody can regurgitate information, but can you explain it? Can you apply it? Can you synthesize it? That's all the hallmarks of being a professional. And leading is not just down, leading's up too. I've had plenty of leaders, company commander when I was a company gunny that looked to me for certain things because of my experience. I've had platoon commanders that were straight off of brand new to the fleet, that they had the authority, but they just did not have much experience. And it was very much me developing and shaping them with my experiences. Ultimately they were going to be the one to smack the table, but coming to me and saying, Staff Sergeant Gunny, explain this to me. How would you go about doing this, so on and so forth. And being a professional goes a long way in regards to that. So just really embody the mental, physical, and moral standards that you expect of your people. And then the next thing I would say is accountability. Owning 100% of what you need to own. There's things that you control, there's things that you can influence, and there's things that you're concerned about, but you can't control or influence. Sort out everything. Sort out all the tasks that you have in the day, all the responsibility you have in life, and own 100% of the things that you're supposed to own. Don't make excuses for them, and come up with meaningful ways that you're going to improve, and do the same for your people. And when they see that when they know that there's a line and that you are going to hold them accountable when they cross that line, and they know that you care about them, it is a powerful combination. And there might be 1 or 2 knuckleheads that you can't get through to, but by and large, the average individual you're in charge of is going to respond to that. Don't be a hypocrite. If you say show up by a certain time or you're going to get the business, you better not be showing up late. If you start telling them that they better be this fit, you better believe that you better be out there being fit too, or they're going to laugh in your face. If you say that they need to know everything and anything about their job, you might not want to look like a fool when you open your mouth and start talking about things that you don't know about because you stopped learning years ago because you thought you made it because they put some rank on your shoulder. So accountability. Hold yourself accountable, hold your people accountable. And then the last would be just be invested. If you're invested, you're naturally going to go the extra mile. You're naturally going to make yourself available. And that's where the real growth happens. It's when you just want to get home, but you got a Marine who has a problem. Or you just want to get home, but there's some conversation or planning going on that you have something to contribute to. And now all of a sudden, a new bridge has been created, a new relationship is formed. It's the extra mile. That's all I can explain it as. And when you're an invested leader, when you're making yourself available and you are going the extra step to make sure that the mission is going to get accomplished, that your people are taken care of, that once again conditions are set, then you're always going to see fruit of that. When it's Friday and you're going to the field on Monday and there's stuff that needs to get done, but you just want to start your weekend, what are you going to do? When there's a Marine who's slacking and that's not normal for him and you just want to go do something else, what are you going to do? So investment is what ultimately is going to overcome those types of things. So be a professional, hold your people accountable, hold yourself accountable, put yourself in timeout if you need to, and be invested. And if you do those things, your men will realize that you're genuine and they will follow you and they will overlook transgressions. But if you think you're going to be Mr. Tough Guy and that because you're in a role of responsibility, that only applies to them, that's a one-way street and none of it applies to you, they might listen to you, but they will not respect you. No one will remember you fondly. You will not make a lasting impact on anybody, and you're a sham. It's just what it is. So if you love your people, they'll love you. So
if you could travel back in time and visit your high school self, and what advice would you give them for the next 10 to 15 years of their life? And for the purposes of this question, you cannot say join the Marine Corps.
Okay. So there's two things that I always tell my Marines that one of them is mine. At least I think it's mine. If it's not mine, forgive me. The other one's from leaders I've had in the past. So first one that I always tell, I tell my police now, just told them last week, told all my Marines on Friday when they were getting ready to go out on the weekend and possibly lose everything that they fought to earn. It was 18-year-old you's making decisions for 28-year-old you. For the wife you haven't met yet, for the kids you haven't had yet, 18-year-old you is setting conditions for 28-year-old you's life. Financial decisions you make, the professional decisions you make, what you do with your time, you're laying a foundation or you're not. Indecision still a decision. And at the end of the day, if you decide to go live fast and die young mentality and just get into all kinds of debt and make all kinds of poor choices, by the time you do meet that woman that you love, you still start having children. All of a sudden your little girl wants to start taking dancing lessons, but it's $300 a month. You're strapped. Why? You're paying off debt from when you were a young man before you even had this little girl. Or paying a car payment that's outrageous because you just had to keep up with the Joneses and you got a $700 a month car payment, which is half of what you make right now. Whatever it is, 18-year-old you is setting conditions that's going to very much affect 28-year-old you. And I can say now as a 31-year-old husband, father of 3, 8-year-old daughter, 6-year-old son, 2-year-old son, that the good, the bad, and the ugly will come follow you into your future. It's not going to happen in a vacuum, and it's going to affect your relationships. It's going to affect your ability to progress in life. So you better think about it now, because when you look at most adults and you realize that a lot of them aren't living fulfilled lives, they're not working the dream job, they're not doing what I guarantee they weren't saying they were going to be doing when they were in high school. You got to ask how they got there. And normally it came from a lack of plan, a lack of flexibility of that plan, a lack of accountability or discipline. Not always, but normally that is going to be part of it. So the character you're developing now, the habits you're developing now, the money that you're spending or saving right now are opening and closing doors for you down the road, period. And the second part came from, I don't even know who started it. I had a leader named Major Getz that I don't know if he's the one that taught. It was Captain Emmanuel, but they always said the same thing in the brief. And it was life is choices, not chances. It's the choices you make, not the random things that are going to happen to you that are going to dictate the quality of your life. And if you find yourself upside down in a vehicle, bleeding from your face because you decided to go out with a certain group of people, decision one, drink your first beer, your second beer, your third beer, your fourth beer, your fifth beer, your sixth beer, you made a decision to get in the car, you made a decision to put the keys in the ignition, decision to turn it on, decision to put it in drive, decision to drive down the road, and every chance you could have pulled off, and then finally you get in that accident, you kill a family of 5, or you don't kill anybody, but you just got a DUI, your career's over, you're going to the brig, other than honorable discharge, and now all of a sudden you're going to want to reflect about that one bad decision you made. And that wasn't one bad decision. Like, your success or failure in life is going to be the aggregate of the good decisions you were making or the bad ones. Because there's going to be a Marine who's getting off work, going to the chow hall, getting a good meal, going to the gym, getting strong, reading something that expands his mind, staying abreast of current events, getting to bed early. He's going to eat your lunch every morning when it's time to PT. And when it comes time for promotions, he's going to beat you. When it comes time to get retained, he's going to beat you. He's going to get a bonus. You're going to be denied promotion. You're going to be denied retention. And now you're getting out of the Marine Corps with largely not the discipline you had when you started. And you can tell anybody and everybody that it was someone else's fault, but at the end of the day, you made decisions. You had 24 hours in a day just like everyone else does. What are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? And at the end of the day, if you're a good steward and you're doing smart things with your time and your money and your body, with your diet, you're going to see good fruit. If you are eating trash and boozing and dipping and smoking and sleeping in, you're going to see trash. Like, so you have to make a decision that you are going to grow. Because at the end of the day, everyone's like, I want growth. I want this. I want that. No, you want to be comfortable. And that's why most people don't want to go to the gym. It's too early. It's too late. It's too cold. It's too hot. It's too hard. But everybody wants to look a certain way, or everybody wants to run a business. Like, at the end of the day, the people that do these things, that achieve high degrees of success, it's because they were committed to excellence and discipline in the small things over time. And that's why they're where they're at. They didn't get lucky, maybe ones or twos, but the vast majority of people, athletes, whoever you think's amazing, they did it from consistency to excellence over time. So 18-year-old you's making decisions for 28-year-old you, and life is choices, not chances. And if you find yourself somewhere that's great, good job. If you find yourself somewhere that's bad, your fault. Fix it.
We only have a couple more minutes here, and I don't want to take too much more of your time here, Gunny Morris. But I just wanted to know, and first to start things off, our program has made a complete transformation and really focusing on leadership, student athletes, and teaching the fundamentals, but also, giving them opportunities to train those fundamentals, put them into practice with the goal of creating winning cultures, but not just for the team, for the high school, as the deeper element there. Just want to hear your thoughts. To say that you have had a big impact on this program would be the understatement of the century. And not just on this program, but also me. But I just want to hear, what are your thoughts about our program and where we're going with this?
Well, first off, thank you. Praise be to God that you even gave me this opportunity. Recruiting's been a beast. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a lot more stuff like this. And until you came along, like, I had this aching part of me that wanted to, be developing young men into being good men, good leaders. And you gave me that opportunity. And, you had the vision to see that this is painfully needed. And more than ever, where I feel like a lot of the stuff that we've discussed was more commonplace even just 10, 15 years ago. It's dying in the public square right now. And I think that this is timely, it's needed. And I think that there is a disparity with young men who think that leadership translates to talent, or leadership translates to being loud and bullying, or whatever it is. And at the end of the day, coming alongside of them and humbling them by showing them you're not as good of a communicator as you think you are, you're not as physically fit as you think you are, and even if you're the best player on this team, you can't win by yourself. And getting them to a place where they're receptive, and then providing them with the discussions, taking them somewhere mentally so they can go there physically later on the field, or later on in life, and just breaking down these concepts for them so that they can understand them, and facilitating discussion and holding them accountable, giving them tasks, making them carry it out, make them, manage their teams when it comes to fitness, and just really put them through getting sets and reps on what it is to be a leader, so they have something to look back to the rest of their life in college and starting their career in the late stages of their career, of remembering what's it like to be a young man who's trying to figure all these things out, and just to be able to stand in that gap with them and provide them with those types of experiences that are going to actually, because we can read books all day, we can watch TED Talks all day, but until you're put in these situations that really put you through the paces and really, test communication and teamwork and cohesion and the identity of your team, it's all speculation. And what you've developed and what you've brought me into is the ability to do these things. And what you're going to see is that, even if, let's say that it only adds, let's say you have the same season that you had last year for the coaches out there. That's unfortunate on one front, but what I will tell you is this: you're going to have a much better young man leading your team than what you got. And he's going to go out into that community or abroad, and he's going to make a far more reaching impact. So at the end of the day, no one's going to put how many wins they had on their resume their senior year on their sports team. But the young man who brings a positive attitude, a strong work ethic, and embodies these things that we've been talking about into his workplace, he's going to be successful. He's going to be successful in his family. He's going to be successful no matter what industry he goes into. And that, to me, is worth more than anything else that you could be aiming for, because this is going to outlive whatever sport, individually that they're doing. It's creating character. And I think what you're doing is amazing. And I fully support it in any way, shape, or form that I can in the future. And just thank you so much for that platform and for being the one to step up and be like, you know what, I'm not just going to let it be a good idea thing. I'm going to make this happen, and then aggressively taking those steps. So thank you for that, Cameron. Your insight has been just as powerful, and I've earned a very good friend in the process. So thank you.
Gunny Morris, I feel exactly the same way, and I'm so appreciative of everything that you've given us. You've given us your time over the span of like the last year and a half, and I'm not exactly sure how long it's been, but we've encountered so many obstacles, had some great discussions, and we really made a huge impact with some lives. I mean, it's evident. I'm getting text messages saying, "Hey, Cameron, can I grab like 10 minutes of your time? I have a question I want to ask you about how I deal with this situation in my class. Not even on the team, just in my class. I was assigned this to be a leader in this. How do I do that? I would not have been in that situation had we not gone forth and given this a shot. Actually push forward, knowing that we're probably operating on a hypothesis that has been studied. It's probably more than a hypothesis, but man, I'm so appreciative of everything you've given me. Thank you so much for the opportunity. You've made a huge impact not only on this foundation but also me personally, and it's great to be able to call you a friend when it's all said and done. So I'm extremely grateful. Thank you so much for your time. And is there any other closing thoughts?
No, I mean, we pretty much got it all out there. So, for those that are watching this, take it. Don't let this be one more thing that you just tuck away in your head. Take whatever can be one thing from this conversation and find a way to apply it to your situation, your scope of influence today, and just go out there and get after it. And then once you get that, pick your next one. It's be a lifelong learner. You've never arrived, so just keep after it.
Gunny Morris, thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a great rest of the week, and God bless and good luck.
God bless. Thank you, Cameron.
Take care.